Igama lami nguThobo akaHlatshwayo kodwa ngizalwa kaMzizi. Ngihlala eDennisville, ngihlala no-auntie nogogo ney'ngane zami eziyi-2 kodwa ney'ngane eziyi-5. I-high school yami ngingene khona la eDennisville, North Secondary School. Ngagcina ka-grade 10. Yebo ngakhulelwa ngiku-grade 10.
Ka lebitso nna ke Lerato Gatsiane, ke hlaha ka Valley, ke tswa Bophelong, ke holetse Bophelong ka 14. Ka tlong ke dula le ngwana heso, ke dula like bana ba heso. Ke dula le ausi wa ka le abuti wa ka, then re dula le bana ba rona. Nna ha ke sebetse, ke dutse hae. Ya, ha ke sebetse ke dutse hae, which is ke dependile ho yona 350 ya teng.
I'm Ramaphosa. I'm originally from Kanana Park, a place near Fine Town. I stay with my grandmother, my uncle, my cousins. I was raised by a single parent who tried by all means to be there for us, even though she was unemployed, but she did the best for us. She made sure that I never felt the void of not even having a father in my life. She's like the best thing that has ever happened in my life. Okay, Lefa is an ambitious person, hardworking. I just finished matric last year, 2021. I'm also doing my acting on the side. I attend classes at Joburg, and I enjoy it a lot. It gives me life, it gives me peace, it gives me like happiness.
Hey, siyahlupheka la Free State kakhulu. Ngenxa yokuthi akho msebenzi, akusinazimali.
$350 ke applyile, then le teng ke applyile because of like le motho le reng ke ne ke ihloka. So yeah, ka apply ka kena ho like di-app-ong kwa bona, but e le hore ke eng e sokodisitse, but ka qeteletse se ke qeteletse ke ithola.
Well, I heard it from somebody who has, already applied. I asked him questions. Is it doable? Like, can I do it? Is it true that there is something like this? And he said, yes, you can do it. And then let me try this, Unfortunately, then I was 17, I couldn't do it. Okay, I said, okay, let me wait, finish matric, And it happened that I was able to apply for it.
Ke like I apply it's a good one because ne ke tshepa ke trust ka hore e tlo nthusa haholo because ke na le mo tšhelete teng it's needed pride high battle. Okay la bona.
We have a constitution that guarantees the rights for people, that also includes people being able to take care of themselves and their family. Now, if that's a constitutional imperative, it is therefore important for us to understand that those who do not have jobs, number one, those who live in very difficult circumstances, those who live in poverty, in hunger, and those who are facing unemployment, the only way as far as they can be supported is to make sure that we continue with the grants in general. Because remember that the old age grant comes through because the government at the time, way back in 1994, took the grants which had been there, but only for white people in the main, and for a small number of black people.
It's very important, I think, to realize and understand and conceive social protection in a way that recognizes that a child lives in an environment. He or she lives in a family. It's about making sure that there is a system around the child that's caring, that's supportive, as opposed to necessarily focusing on the sole circumstances of a child.
First time tuna again ene khona mpusta aba ke dula le mama ha ona ntate hlokofetse ke na le batjhana ke na le ngwana ke la ke sa dule le yena bona tjena mara ke dula le batjhana ba expectile ke malome just ka na tloetsa hla tropong o tla le di fruits o tla le o understand Shabo laile maotwana but laile o understand something o khona o tla ba le bona ba khona o thaba malome a gona ko o teng.
At home, I come from a very, poor background. My mom, she's unemployed. My brothers, they are also trying by all means to find piece jobs, try to help in the house. So I felt the need to apply for it to try and help where I can. I didn't want to bombard her or them with my problems, Yes.
The interesting thing about the 350 Rand that was introduced during COVID lockdown is really that for the first time, I think, South Africans became aware of the level of destitution that is there in the country. That destitution was indeed highlighted very strongly with the lockdown. People couldn't venture out to go and look for jobs. By the way, when we speak about those jobs, it was predominantly people who were doing what are called piece jobs here and there, temporary engagements here and there, the so-called men on the side of the road. And there were concerns that came from different quarters in South Africa. There are economists that wrote an open letter to the president indicating that under the circumstances of people having lost jobs and not earning an income, the situation in the country was going to be dire and actually it was going to be bad. Research went on to prove exactly that.
In some senses, the basic income grant for a working age adult discussion in this country was dead effectively. Right? Then COVID arrives and all of a sudden we understand that there's this huge shock into the labor market. And so the discussion was really not driven so much about the unemployed, it was driven about around the employed who might fall out of employment or lose earnings because of COVID.
The COVID kind of accelerated thinking along a whole sort of lot of fronts in South Africa, and it let something through that was essentially disallowed to even be thought about or proposed within government up until that point. And my understanding is that even the Department of Social Development wasn't proposing a national treasury, said, we want this and we want it now. So COVID provided a window, and for better or worse, that's meant that a conversation has begun at a different level than would ever have been permitted before, and that is a good thing.
I think COVID-19 pushed us to implementing things that we might have never thought we were going to do at this period of time. In fact, when we look at the 350 and the proposals for the basic income grant support, which has been in the pipeline but disappeared. I mean, the policy was developed as way back as 2002. And after that, it disappeared. It took the impact of COVID-19 and the questions being answered. You have now introduced 350. Then what? What are you going to do?
The United Nations in South Africa is actually having this conversation as we speak. We need to view the current discourse and conversation that's going on in the country on the basic income grant. As you know, we are a collective of a number of entities representing the UN in South Africa. We need to make sure that we bring a common position. That's actually something that's been requested of us by the government of South Africa, and particularly the Department of Social Development, because it strengthens their case when we come as a united, coherent system to say this is what we feel is an important way of dealing with social protection in South Africa.
One of the most shocking things about our country is so soon, relatively speaking, after the adoption of the final constitution, we see a country that is completely marked by poverty. The most recent Stats SA poverty figures go back to 2014, 2015, the Income and Expenditure Survey. And according to those, 55.5% of South Africans lived below the upper bound poverty line. 25% of South Africans lived below the food poverty line, which is 624 Rand per person per month.
Poverty, you know, when Stats SA measures income poverty in South Africa, it's over 50% of South Africans who fall below the poverty line, which is about 1,300 Rand per person per month in a household. And so 55% of South Africans fall below that amount of money to live every month.
During the COVID period, we had a specific poverty survey that was done to try and keep pace with what was doing. It was called the NIDS-CRAM survey, and what that found was that depression amongst women particularly, because they were having to look after households, shot up tremendously.
Like akekho umuntu osebenzayo siphila ngegrant asa-afford njengaqala.
If we are considering a household, let's say, you know, women-headed household with a number of children, the caregiver, whoever is in the most immediate environment of the child, is the one who would be supported in a way that covers the full spectrum of needs of people in that household.
Re le batho ba batsho ne re dependile tšheleteng ya bana grant. Ne ona le banana ba ile go ngeng ba ja tšhelete ya bana grant. Motho a ikapese ka tšhelete ya ngwana grant a sa sheba ngwana. So since when you get 350 wa gona go le ena a ka ikapese. Before 350 ke no sna ntwana o motho a ikapese like wa bona. Ona apara ka tšhelete ya ngwana a le ba lo go a etseng tlamile ngwana a tloja, tlamile ngwana e reaching, tlamile ngwana a apare.
I was happy to apply for that grant, to know about grant, grant. Until they were disappointed, like next I expected that kind of an answer. At the end of the day, I was happy that it is going to be grant. I'm going to get a boost of life. Thanks God. But it went anti-clockwise. Like.
Poverty and lack of hope means that people just don't see a way forward. So Hein, I do want us to move on to the basic income grant. And for listeners who haven't yet read the book, would you take us through why you decided to write on a basic income grant?
First thing to say is I don't like calling it a grant. which has overtones of charity, of a power imbalance as well. It's a basic income, whether universal or not. I think it's a very important shift I'd like us to start thinking about, that we don't talk about it as a grant, which leads on to ideas of handouts and dependency and so on.
We don't have an extensive food security system. So income support, the SRD had to do that too. It was a key part of its immediate thing under COVID.
There is a clear movement in many of the countries that I've worked in or for, to making sure that the United Nations support the establishment where it doesn't exist, or the strengthening of a social protection system that also is a recognition of the importance of a country, a community, a society itself contributing to the well-being of its people.
We all know which building blocks have to be in place to build a successful and prosperous society. We all know that. It's not as if South Africa needs to invent those things. The world over, you have prosperous countries and countries that look after and care for their citizens. It's not as if South Africa is being expected to do something that's never been done here.
It's almost decent of people to say, oh, well, I don't think, maybe we shouldn't be asking for this because we should be working or something. The reality is that many people won't be able to participate effectively in society without some basic support.
You need money to do anything. You need money to look for a job. You need money to pay for the bus, the taxi. Every aspect of this requires money. You don't have money because you're unemployed.
I want to go to town. Just think about 30 ranta batla 30 ranta eo re ke hate dropo o ke la bona ke khona hore le nna ke itwanela ke o apare my boxing glove.
Social grants lead to positive outcomes.
It improves their ability to look for work because they do have some income.
I have, my acting, to go to Joburg, it's money. I have to cater for that also. Try to help myself with my necessities, those important things, Even when applying for varsity, I had to pay for registration.
I-youth earning ayiqedanga isikolo angisho. Iyakwazi ukusiza sikhona ukuthola imisebenzi kalula. Uma ungayanga esikolweni, uma ungana certificate, awukhona ukuthola umsebenzi. So i-350 iyasiza because siyakhona ukuvala lapho sikhona khona ukuvala khona.
We did research as a department, but also other institutions did research on where is the 350 going, on what are the people spending this money. And the research that came back, it just came back simple and straightforward. The majority of our people are spending that money on their basics.
350 ke tšhelete nngwe le gore ke eng ya nthusa ska ka tlung ke kgona gore ke reke phofo ke reke fish oil ke kgona gore ke reke body vege wa bona sneng like ha re ntho tsa ngwana di a shorta body aparo ke kgona gore ke petche mo lemong.
People spend it the way they want to spend it. But there are those people who know that they have families to look after, who know that they, at least, even right now, if you are receiving it and you're as young as I am, just think at home. They think at home, they think about their family, they think about the important things that affect your life.
Yeah, yona ke bona benefit ya 350 more like around unyaka because of bateng batho ba ile renkeng o monto o jetsa o mbotse like maybe I say again umbotso ya ka salo topa wa bona dishabonyana salo topa inyana wa bona.
The grant helped me because I could help myself from the beginning of the year till now. I could buy myself those necessities. I could cater for myself for for transport from here to Joburg to do what I love, all those important things, Yes.
Ke dula le mosadi molo fela. E kgona ho balansa. Wa bona? Ke kgona hore hosane, it might never knowing. Today I can be like this. Tomorrow hosane ke shop o kila bona. Ka yona ya kgona, like it has a role in my life.
The empirical evidence for what small amounts of money enable people to do is absolutely indisputable. It does not get spent on tobacco, drugs, and cigarettes. There is absolutely no evidence for this, and anybody who claims otherwise should show me the evidence.
Income support of this nature has a very positive impact on people's participation in society. It does allow some people who are running small businesses to start something up, and there is evidence that happened almost immediately with the COVID SRD grant.
I always tell people that if COVID and the grants never happened, we wouldn't have an ice cream store, honestly, so it's the driver, you see, 100%. When the first 350 hit, I was just assisting in Guinea, and then I felt like it's not going anywhere and it's not sustainable. I understand at 350, you need to choose which in. Is it food? Is it toiletries? You see. So after saving 2 months' money off the grant, I went to the stores to purchase products that I loved, and it wasn't a thing of I want to open up a store. It was an experiment. First batch we were able to land a similar batch, so we were able to grow slowly and then gradually and all of those things.
Amna le batho ba ba lo renkeng e ba tswela molemo ba o ke tsebang ba butse business ka yona, which is business a teng ene se business e kgolo, but o qadile a bula business e nyenyana a rekisa di ice le di ice cream.
Bese ngithola ngathola umsebenzi so yangigosa ukuthi ngijike at that point ukuthi ngizame ukuthi enye alternative of source of income okuyishishinini le sazama lokuqala la wasazama njalo nanjalo, so manje ever since lokusoba sabantu abazama ukudeka siphila ngako day to day.
Nna ke la ka zama ke bule business ka yona mara ya ntsola molemo, which is business ya teng gore ke stopile like ho sona le dipula nyana because of the ice net sa tsamai, ice cream ne sa tsamai, le hape ne re hlotswa ke electric ne dula e tsamai, then ka tlatlela ho di rekisa. So le nna somehow ke na no starting from this month ke qala ke save ne ke na no ke etse business nyana ka yona.
We talk about social security as being transformative, enabling people to move into a better circumstance or just to keep there, to keep ticking by. And we've seen this with the 350 grant. As soon as you use that to start making money to start your small business, you get the certain grant taken away from you. So your innovation gets punished.
Abeqala ngo 2020 le 350 ngayithola kahle ngo August. This year stop angithi ngo April. Azange ngasuke ngitholile ngicala ukuyithola last month. Mangiqala futhi ngiyithola. Abe ngiloku ngicheck ukuthi ngine source of income.
Since I've ever received June, July. The rest always today. I tried, and they also gave me a toll-free number. It's a free number. Like I tried. When I called them, they said to me, they see I got an income coming in me. I say, no, stop it. I don't have an income coming. Boba income now and then. Come on.
Well, I guess the most important thing is to assist our people in the appreciation of setting systems that are effective enough to be able to reach out to them. That's our task. That's our job.
Ngwana yeso interpending since I told her one. Since I ilakwala, I told her April. Since I told her one. So I'm affected haholo because ke motho a sa sebetseng, motho a ditseng hae, and ke motho wa ntate o na le mosadi o na le bana.
I have to, cancel it about around December because I've applied for NSFAS and NSFAS and 350, I have to cancel it, in order for my NSFAS application to be approved, for next year for varsity. Well, I want to do Bachelor of Film, Television, that.
We have to make sure that it is the right person who receives it, the right person who meets the criteria for the 350, but also it's got to be somebody that we can also do a check out as to whether they're not receiving any other social grants. So part of what delays in instances is when that data about people has to be checked against other data in government. I know that's easy for me to say, but for somebody who has absolutely nothing, can't put bread on the table, for them, I'm just telling them a long excuse.
But Baba sebetsante, they never happen. Something doesn't exist, but it's like it's something. When it comes to that mind, hard knock life. How totally next.
Firstly, when it was initiated, it was supposed to be for 6 months. After that, there's been piecemeal extensions by 3 months, by 2 months, by a month. It's just been haphazard. It does not demonstrate a clear, directed focus on policy issues. So what we have had is an instance where we have the 350 grant. It was introduced, it was paid, it was terminated, it was stopped. It was then reintroduced, piecemeal fashion, and we need not forget that when the Minister of Finance extended it to the year 2024, our president had extended it to the year 2023. So we've got extensions that come at different times, for different time period, and from different powers within government. That doesn't, to me, demonstrate a government that is convinced or a government that's got a very clear, very focused, very directed policy positions.
The social grant as it stands is not sufficient to address all the issues of dignity, not sufficient to address all the issues of poverty. It's a starting point to give people control over their lives.
And so that number is offensive in a sense. Ex ante, you think about it, 350 Rand a month. It's offensive.
Yes, not to sound a bit, ungrateful, no? But 350, I can't even buy a grocery that will last for the whole month.
The 350 Rand grant, when you look at it, it cannot even buy a single loaf of bread per day for a month. It cannot.
It's oil, 10 kg of rice, 10 kg of phofu, flour. If it's 350, I don't maybe I can tell
In instances where you have families pool the grant, so they bring all the 350 together, and indeed, in those kind of circumstances, it does make a difference.
Ke abutu aka wa ithola, ke usu aka wa ithola. Yeah, which is rena lo re kopanye tšhelete teng go kgona go rekeng something ya o ja ka tlung.
If they had to increase the grant, I would be happy if they would add another 700 on top of it.
What's maybe like a 600 or 650. Yeah, it's something.
Ngokuthi nje i-amount le yakhona nento esidingakalayo empilweni lana ufumana ukuthi isasencinci isa-challenge nakhona impilo ukuthi ngathi ingayengezeka ibeni so lama isaselapho tata ukuthi iwisho ukuthi ngabe bekhona ukuyengezeka besingakhona ukukhuluma okunye kodwa eqinisweni yona yavala lapho ukuvule khona tata omncinci lowo
yona for the sake baka increase ne I don't fight, I don't want them to increase it. It's the way bona baka khona to the limit e bona baka khona. I mean like letsonyana le ba fileng nna ke a le leboha. I don't isengalo kaofela mo bona ba khona go fita teng. It's fine. Oh, it's not that tamle jole be hang ga ba batle wang understand. Mo ba khona go fita teng. It's fine that amount of money you can make a living. Then utana ekeletse ka nako e when it comes like
So what we do need to appreciate and understand, and this is very important and key, the 350 Rand grant that was introduced in May of 2020 is no longer 350 Rand today because of the rise in living cost and also inflation eroding the value of that grant.
What Treasury has been and the Minister of Finance have been attempting to do for ever since has been to try and get it off the books.
Historically, there has been very, very strong resistance from particularly the National Treasury when it comes to providing income support to unemployed South Africans.
From the Treasury side and from the private sector side, many arguing, okay, we can't afford this. 350 times by the number of potential recipients lands up at a number around 50 billion Rand. Okay, and so initially in the budget of 2021, government said, okay, we're stopping this SRD thing. It was a temporary COVID measure. And then when the uprisings happened in the middle of last year, then it came back again. And then it was put back in the budget. It was put back in, but temporarily for 2022-23, and the medium-term budget statement recently said that's going to be the same situation again. So it didn't come out of a well-thought-through strategy to provide for the working age population in South Africa as the gap in our system. It was emergency relief, but nonetheless, it showed that you can actually do this stuff at very short notice if you have the will.
The other myth associated with that argument, or problem with that argument, is that we actually give very substantial subsidies to high-income people. Very substantial subsidies. These probably amount to 180 billion Rand a year. And they go to the people who are taxpayers. It's a tax subsidy. So you only benefit because you're a high taxpayer. So if you're a low-income person, a tax subsidy makes no difference to you. So the tax subsidies are enormous in the retirement system. But the very, very interesting feature of that is that nobody has ever analyzed it. When that ideological issue is raised, it's raised in relation to low-income people. When it's a transfer to them, it's a big story. We must basically defend every single part of the proposal. But when it's a subsidy going into the retirement industry and to financial services sector, no analysis. Nobody has to defend it. It's not controversial. Not a single business part of the business press will actually evaluate that or go into it's just assumed it's the right thing to do. But it is a handout.
South Africa is the most unequal country in the world. And it is, both in terms of income that is earned or not earned, but also in wealth. So people who have access to assets have access to far more assets than their sort of collegiate people in other countries would have.
I don't know how somebody can say, we can't afford this, in some fiscal sense. Okay, 50 billion is a large amount of money. But given the use to which the economically active South Africans put this money, I just don't understand.
The lesson for me is that the statement that a UBI is unaffordable, I think, is an undefensible statement, or an indefensible statement. There are so many variables that first have to be confronted before one can make that statement. It is what do you regard as being important enough to find money for? And that's a political decision. That's why the framing of the demand is so important, and it's why it's so important that it's not just a decision taken by technocrats.
When you talk about financial viability and affordability, right? If you want to look at affordability, you also have to look at it from a political perspective.
So I think this political variant, the political conditions for UBI are fundamentally important. When we come to what's affordable in terms of counting the pennies and the pounds, these are debates which we have to have in a rigorous and open-minded way. Something that emerges from mobilization, popular organizations, civil society, pushing and demanding it because they will have to defend it.
Politics rarely moves things forward when very often in many countries it's multi-parties that agree to the same thing, not just one. It's society that agrees to it, and if you as a political party don't agree to do this, then you're not going to be in government for very much longer.
Our system of government at the moment has failed. It has failed by not providing them with jobs, working with industry to provide jobs for those people.
When I first started looking at the basic income grant, it was really as a right. I thought it was a human right, as a constitutional right that should be met because it's in the Constitution and because people need to have the certainty. Then I started looking at the statistics in with sort of greater focus, and particularly the unemployment figures. I think if you look today in 2022, our second quarter unemployment figures reflected that 12.4 million adults are unemployed, and a further 12.5 million adults are not related to the labour market in any way. They're neither employed nor in training or unemployed. They just are. And then the number of employed people, including the informal sector, is about 14 million. So we have about 24 million adults who are not in a job.
The existing economy with its existing structure and our existing labour force the way it is, it's going to take a long time to absorb, and unemployment rates have been going up rather than down.
The assumption that we're going to employ all those people that are unemployed at this point in time, somehow miraculously in the next few years, it's not going to happen.
Many of the people are going to have to create their own livelihoods. There's no other way. But how are we supporting them to do that? Because often this discussion of we're never going to create the number of jobs means who's going to create the number of jobs? It's very unclear.
Government and industry fail to create jobs. That's the first thing. They fail to create jobs. And at the same time, there is some reluctance to introduce the basic income grant. My own argument is that you cannot deny people both jobs and a basic income grant. You have to provide one of those two. preferably it has to be jobs.
Work and what it offers to us is and has changed fundamentally. We live in South Africa in a society which cannot provide decent, remotely decently paid work to more than 40% of the population.
It's only if you don't embed yourself in the realities of South Africa that you can come with things like, okay, but anybody who wants to work can get a job.
The opposition tends to come from people who have an ideological view that providing income without somebody having worked for it is somehow problematic.
We get told that people should be able to work and get a job, even though we know in our heart of hearts, we know people who are unemployed, we know a lot of people who are unemployed, and we know that they're not lazy people.
There are no people that want to live off social grants. South Africa is a wealthy country. People look around, they see beautiful houses, they see beautiful residential areas. They all want to go up in life and live well. And they know very well that a grant is not the way out.
We need to start at a basic level, but it's almost as if we need to invert the entire economy, because the economy is meant to be providing for people. But as it stands, it's as if ordinary people are subject to the whims of the economy and are completely rejected and marginalized if the economy doesn't need them.
The argument that has come from government has been that we have programs, public employment creation programs, such as EPWP, Expanded Public Works Programs, and other similar types of state-created employment opportunities. So that mainly has been put forward as being the solution, but it's not workable. It does not resolve the unemployment problem and unemployment challenge.
The reality is you can't solve South Africa's employment problems with employment programs, special employment programs.
Our SMME policy and our medium enterprise policy, our small and medium enterprise policy, and our super small and medium enterprise policies have all failed badly. Now you're saying we must ramp that up instead of just putting money in the hands of people.
The basic income grant comes in to address policy failure in labor market policy and the failure of South Africa's economy to create jobs.
We have specific grants for things like protecting children and ensuring that they have income. And we have grants for people who are disabled and people who are old age who aren't expected to work. The issue is that we don't protect many people who have to survive in their day-to-day existence. And the assumption has been, oh, well, they should just be working. But you put people in such difficulties that they can't access society in any viable way. Then you exclude them. And in fact, you will have a society, a divided society as a consequence. Social cohesion breaks down.
What we need to ask ourselves as a country is this: those that are without income, what must they eat? Where must they get the bread that they need? Where must they get the potatoes? Where must they get the milli meal? How are they supposed to get that?
Think like that and think of your 350 grant as an investment in them.
So in a country like South Africa, to say that there should be no income support for adults because adults should get a job, it doesn't make sense. There's no logic in that. So people would rather stop and say we have high unemployment than to ask the next question, which is a difficult question, as in, what should we do next? What solution is there?
It's not as if there aren't workable solutions. What is lacking is the will to resolve these problems.
For the grant to work effectively, even if at its own level, you want it properly designed so that when people do get a job, they get off the grant. If it's not a big right now, where a big is support to everybody in the country, If it's a grant to help the economically active who need to in the engagement with the labour market, well, then you need it properly designed to do that. And the mechanisms to increase the grant need to be properly thought through.
Our system at this point in time, the system of social grants, should in total have as its objective the elimination of poverty at the upper bound poverty level. So it's not saying it at the decent standard of living level, saying it at the upper bound poverty level. Now that's because that's a fairly steep target to achieve and will have to be achieved over time when we're in a position where we're having to struggle to defend merely an allocation of 350 Rand per person. But the upper bound poverty level is what we would regard as basically the lowest level of reasonable income support that's required for people in need.
For quite a number of us, we do think what goes on at the moment is deliberate. It's not by mistake. Government spends billions and billions of rands on procurement. So there can be ways that can be found to bring more people into the economy.
You can also restructure parts of government expenditure. There's massive, massive inefficiencies in government, and it's a question of priorities.
Our push is to push back those that are pushing back the opportunity and possibility of a social security that is sustainable, social security that empowers our people, social security that lifts people out of hunger. And therefore the 350, we are pushing for its extension, and I'm very happy that the first one we didn't make it, but the second one, the third one, we made it, and I believe we made it because we were able to convince other government departments such as Treasury, for instance, that is responsible for the purse, and we understood where Treasury came from when they say, no, there isn't money, but we asked the question back, can we afford to have so many people in South Africa hungry? Can we afford to have so many people in South Africa unemployed?
There are a couple of ways at looking at why leadership should consider adopting a basic income grant. Or extending the social relief of distress grant until we have a basic income grant. The first is from a human rights perspective. It exists in our constitution, the universal right to social security. It is a universal human right in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It sits in the SADC People's Social Treaty. So that's from a human rights perspective. If leadership says, well, we don't really, human rights are not really the thing that is getting us going, it makes economic sense. We cannot save our economy unless we have greater distribution of income. In terms of basic monetary policy, if people are not able to buy, there's no demand. And if there's no demand, there's no production. So there's no employment. And it's a really vicious cycle. And that's why we've seen our economy shrinking, our unemployment growing as jobs shrink, because there just is no demand. If you go into any spaza shop in township area, the choice is really small because people just don't have disposable income. People don't have the ability to create their own jobs because there's nobody who can support them. So that's from the economic situation. But also from the political and question of stability, people need to take cognizance of the fact that if you have the majority of people with nothing to lose, then they are incredibly volatile and any spark can ignite them.
We need a country, we need a nation to provide for its people with the resources, no matter how modest and limited that they are. That social protection system needs to be there. It's a way for people to have dignity, but it's also a way, in my view, in my sense, for a country to be dignified and proud.
There'll be a time when we have we have households where nobody is employed and nobody in living memory was employed. So the crisis is, what are we doing to create a society that's ready for that? And that's why the basic income grant, to my mind, enables us to distribute income in a completely guaranteed fashion. It doesn't depend on whether you've got a job or not.
As a country, we have committed to, we've signed and ratified many international instruments on human rights. The Universal Declaration on Human Rights is one of them, and many others where as a country we commit ourselves that we will indeed respect human rights. Our constitution also has a Bill of Rights that is an extension of that respect of human rights. So the basic income grant then addresses quite a number of political obligations that we have as a society, of social solidarity, of human rights issues, and many other aspects really that as a society and as a country under our government, we should be making sure that South Africans are assisted through basic income support.
We should always be protecting people of working age. And you can create different regimes around protecting, around how you support people back into the workplace. Job reskilling programs, job placement programs that are tied to the social security system. This is what you also find in the very developed social protection systems in Europe, elsewhere. They don't only give you income support, they also give you the support to re-access the labour market.
Without some sort of social vision and leadership, people sit wherever they are in their positions in society and just sort of posture about how life really works in this country. And it needs leadership to say, no, but this is how life really works. We actually do know how life works in this country. We can spell it out for South Africans and say, this is our vision, And then whatever, then the sky's the limit.
This is a rich society-wide debate that has to be engaged in. And we know that it is happening because if you look at the kind of survey results from 5 years ago against 2 years ago, about the percentage of South Africans who support the idea of a UBI, it is of a different order. We now have at least half of South Africans when polled are willing to support a UBI. That was not the case in 2017, 2018. So we're on the road, I think, to this, but it's going to be a process, which I'm pretty sure we will end up with something that we can feel proud of in the next decade. I'm quite sure of that.